welcome to Doc Talks News and Views. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katrina.
And we're here today with Susan Joyce. And I'm really excited to have Susan here with us today because it's one of those interesting things where you never really know who your neighbors are. So I want to say hello, neighbor, to Susan, because Susan's lived in Northborough for a very long time, and we just actually became acquainted with one another through the pandemic over email. And I'm just so thrilled to be here with Susan today, and we're going to talk about how the internet has changed the way we look for work. So with that idea in mind, go ahead. Katrina, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just
Okay,
going to say that's a pretty timely topic, Deb.
Well, I was thinking also too, new year, maybe people are looking for a new job, and without getting into it, I'm going to say hello, Susan. And finally, it's so nice to have you here with us for this chat. And I'm really, really glad you're here. So let's start a little bit. I think our listeners might want to know a little bit more about you. And so one of the things you shared with me is that you worked at DEC Digital back in the high 80s, in 1981 through 1994, which is a long run at one company. And we talked about how you saw that many layoffs happened and people were searching for new opportunities. There was big change for digital at that time. And so I guess I want to hear a little bit more about your background and how you came to know how the internet actually changed the way we started looking for work, and what your role was in facilitating that.
Well, my role was an unofficial one, of course, but I had been, before I worked at DEC, I'd been in HR at Harvard University, the Central University Personnel Office. So I was experienced in how recruiting worked from the employer perspective. And then at DEC, I was fortunate, extremely lucky actually, that the internet was my contract when it was a private federal government network. So I knew more about it than the average bear, even the average bear at DEC, because I'd been working with it for several years by the time the government turned it loose and digital turned me loose. So I already had kind of a technical background there, and I understood HR. And it was fascinating to watch sites like Harvard and the Boston Globe start posting jobs everywhere. And then Monster was born in Massachusetts in 1994. And they advertised a lot on local radio. I was poking around Monster for quite a while, not because I was looking for a job, because DEC had sort of given me a distrust of management. I wanted to start my own company, so that's what I did. But the company I started, because I knew the internet, was a web development company.
Wow, that's really fascinating. It's interesting how some of our backgrounds, we don't think that we're related, so you have this technical expertise in the very beginnings of the internet, and you have all this human resource background. So it's just really interesting to me how people combine their interests to make a new career. I find that fascinating. So you created this new company. Actually, I think I kind of did that too, how I became a librarian, but we'll talk about that maybe later on in the episode. So you created your company, and one of the things you did was you created JobHunt.org.
Actually, I bought it. Someone else created it.
That's right. I remember you told me that in the email. So you bought it. So when all you're hunting around, you found Monster, you found JobHunt.org, and you bought it. And then what happened?
Well, at the time, because I was lucky enough to know about HR and the internet, I had been giving online job search classes everywhere I could, because I knew my colleagues at DEC were struggling to find work, and I knew other people were struggling too. And since I kind of understood more than the average bear, I wanted to share what I understood, and that's how I found Job Hunt. A guy in California founded it, and then he founded it in like 1992 or 1993, and then in 1996 or 1997 he decided to sell it. And when I saw it was up for sale, I bought it. Just because I could, I guess. Anyway, and I started adding links to employer websites. You know, I'd find the career section of the employer website and I would link to it. And I did that by city within state. And I had, at one point in time, I had 20,000 links on Job Hunt out to different employer resources. And then we switched search engines. I don't know if you remember Alta Vista, but Alta Vista was one of the early search engines. Not certainly a fabulous one, but one we all used because it was all we had. And then Google came along, and Google basically made my directory kind of unnecessary. So, and it was very hard to maintain all those links because people would change URLs constantly. So I started writing articles. I had been writing articles on how to job search safely and successfully, because there were an awful lot of job scams out even back in the mid 1990s. It just sort of evolved into, now I think it's got something around 2,000 articles on it, maybe more.
I have to say to our listeners that when Susan first mentioned this to me, I did go right on jobhunt.org, and it really is an outstanding website for anything, whether you're looking for, I need a job on the weekends or I need a high-level professional job. I really would say start right there. There's so many helpful articles too. I think that's probably my favorite is, in addition to all the links, is there's lots of helpful things like how to do an interview over the web. A lot of us, you know, we're still used to in-person interviews, and that went away with the pandemic. So all those articles are so helpful about how we look for work now.
And I was lucky that I was in sort of the beginning of things, and there were a lot of people. I mean, I didn't know everything there was to know about job search and recruiting, but I knew a lot of people who did. You know, Martin Yates and Dick Bowles and Joycelyn Kennedy and a bunch of really, really very knowledgeable people. And people like Martin and Hannah Morgan and, you know, a bunch of recruiters started writing articles for Job Hunt because they knew a lot more about that aspect than I did. So there are a lot of articles by very smart people in Job Hunt.
It sounds like a great resource.
I hope so. That was my goal, was to help people, because I saw people really suffering. The people who'd been laid off from DEC, some people really suffered. They lost their homes, you know, couldn't make their mortgage payments. It was really ugly for a lot of people for quite a while.
Oh boy.
And sometimes it's still ugly now for people.
I have a question actually. Having not gone to jobhunt.org yet, is it a free service for people?
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great.
It's advertiser supported, and actually last year, about this time last year, I sold it to a site I liked very much, a company called Flex Jobs, and they do a really good job of finding, you know, part-time jobs, short-term jobs, gigs, that kind of thing, and they're real jobs. You know, if you go to most job boards, you can find fake jobs, but Flex Jobs does their best to eliminate those. And that's one of the things I really like about them. And they bought Job Hunt last year. So it's not my problem right now. I don't have to maintain it, worry about what Google wants or what Google doesn't want. It's not my problem, unfortunately.
Awesome.
Yeah, but again, that was good that you brought up. It is free. It's actually on our website under the Northborough Job Seekers, excuse me. So if you go under the Northborough Job Seekers part of our webpage, folks, you'll see the link to Job Hunt right there. Or you could just Google it, jobhunt.org.
Just don't forget the hyphen, job-hunt.org.
That's correct. It is job-hunt.org, correct. Or I stand corrected. it was interesting that you started talking about some of your colleagues and your friends. You mentioned Yates and you mentioned Bowles, and we have all of their books in the in our library collection too, in case people want to come in and check those out. Martin Yates and Richard Bowles, you'll recognize their titles right away. Some of them are called Knock 'em Out, Knock 'em
Dead.
Knock 'em Dead resumes, Knock 'em Dead interviews, and probably everybody might have heard of at some point in their life. What Color is Your Parachute? That is a book that is produced annually, created by Richard Bowles, who it happens to be a personal friend of Susan. So can we talk about like some of the collaborative work you've done with Rick?
Well, Dick was a really, really, really smart guy. Unfortunately, we lost him in 2017, but he and I worked on a lot of stuff. I actually did his website for a while. But what we worked on, we sort of talked back and forth about what was effective for job search, how things work. Dick is a really smart guy. He started at MIT, and then he, as an undergrad, and then he went to Harvard, where he graduated from Harvard either summa or magna cum laude. He was, when it comes to IQs, he was very bright. And I think his major was physics or something really simple like that. But he ended up being a minister, and he was very concerned about helping people. That was really Dick's goal. So he and I worked together a lot on some things regarding technology and job search. And one of the things that we talked a lot about was networking, because Dick knew networking was the key to job search, and he was trying very hard to help people be more successful in their networking and also understand how the internet worked. I used to visit his house a couple of times a year over in California on the other coast, and Dick would be sitting on his couch with his Apple computer in his lap, writing the next version of Parachute. He was a very smart, very nice man. Smart kids too.
Wow. I have to say, the whole networking thing, I would have loved to have thanked Dick personally about this, but back when I read his book was in the 80s, when you were first starting to put together how to search online. So I was kind of like right on the cusp of that. In the late 80s, I had read the Richard Bowles, What Color is Your Parachute? And I had been working in sort of like an admin capacity in a social worker type of government organization. And I thought I wanted to do marketing research. And so after reading this book, I did take Dick's advice, and I started learning how to network the old-fashioned way, making phone calls. But what I really wanted to share with our listeners today was I did get a man in marketing research who said, yeah, sure, come in and talk to me. I'll tell you about my job. And then halfway through the conversation, he had said, I don't have a job for you. I would hire you right now if I did. But my friend Shirley in the next office over does. He called her. I had a job that afternoon. So it works. And it's really fabulous. But that was back, when you could call people and get them on the phone. And, even going to a website now, people call me at the library and say, can you find me a phone number? And it's really difficult. So how do we reach out to people to network now?
I think, and I wish I owned stock, I think in Microsoft, I think LinkedIn is the best place to be right now. There are like 770 million members across the world. So, that's more than twice the population of the United States is on LinkedIn. And recruiters depend on it. The last time, before Microsoft bought LinkedIn, I looked at the LinkedIn annual report, and something like 90% of the revenue was coming from recruiters. They loved it. They can find people on LinkedIn, and if you're looking for a job, you want to be found on LinkedIn. And in fact, most of the time, so many recruiters I've spoken with, when they get an application or a resume, they compare it to the LinkedIn profile. And the two of them have to match. And if they don't match, they believe the LinkedIn profile, not the resume. And if they don't believe the resume, you're out. I mean, maybe they're more desperate now and they're a little bit more flexible, but you know, the last few years, resume versus LinkedIn, LinkedIn won every time.
Wow.
And it's, you know, it's not that hard to have a good LinkedIn profile. You have to dig in and spend some time, and your resume is probably the starting point, but then you add a lot more information. You show you describe your accomplishments. You don't just say you're well organized. You give examples of how you're well organized, or how you're a good marketer, or how you're a good salesperson, or how you're a good accountant. You give examples, and you can do that on LinkedIn, where you don't really have the space to do that very many times in a resume. So the LinkedIn profile helps you get started. It helps you build your public base of credibility. And then you can leverage LinkedIn endlessly for networking.
Right.
And
So
you can use Google to leverage LinkedIn too. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes.
okay. So actually, Susan, I think you'll be coming to the library at the end of February. We're hoping, right, to talk a little bit more about how to have a great LinkedIn presence. I mean, a great online presence, with LinkedIn being a really important component of that. So, you know, I'm going to confess to the world right now, I don't have a LinkedIn. Well, wait a minute, that's not true. I do have a LinkedIn profile that I have not updated in a long time. But and when we talk about connections, I think I had made my LinkedIn profile live, and within 10 minutes I started getting emails from long lost friends. I wasn't looking for a job at the time, but it was interesting to me because we were talking about our careers, and one of my old high school friends was looking for someone, and I said, hey, this person might be interested in what you're looking for. I don't remember the outcome, honestly, but there's all these small examples that it is very powerful.
It is very powerful, and a robust profile is the best because it includes the keywords, and keywords are search terms people use. So if they're searching for a reference librarian, they'll search on that term. And if you're a reference librarian, hopefully that's included a few times on your LinkedIn profile, and then you'll appear in the LinkedIn search results. Now, having LinkedIn members, having LinkedIn contacts, people you're connected with on LinkedIn, the more people you're connected with, the better. Again, you do need to be careful. There are definitely fake LinkedIn profiles out there. So you don't want to accept every LinkedIn connection invitation that you get, but you also want to reach out to people that you know and invite them to connect. Personalize an invitation to them. And the more LinkedIn connections you have, the more you appear in search results inside LinkedIn. So that has a very big impact on how visible you are. If you've got 50 connections, you're not going to be as visible as somebody with 500 plus by a long shot. So there's a bunch of aspects to it that we'll go into in much greater detail in the session in February.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. So everybody who's listening to this looking for a job, or knows someone who's looking for a job, sign up for Susan's workshop, and, get your LinkedIn profile going. Because it probably is the best way, right, for recruiters, and that's how it all happens now.
It is. And one of the things I always recommend to people, and it's counterintuitive, is you want to set up an email address, a professional email address, because for so many people, when LinkedIn first started, there's one email address that was associated with the LinkedIn profile, and people used their work email address. And then if they lost their job, they didn't have access to their LinkedIn profile. So, set up an email address with Google or with Yahoo or with whoever, that's separate from your work and hopefully separate from your home, just so, you know, if you change internet service providers, you don't lose your email.
That's really helpful. Wow. So in addition to having this great LinkedIn profile, the other half of working and looking for a job online, I mean, there's all these job boards like Indeed. And there's also kind of like I would have done back in the 80s. Where are there this type of places that I can work in? For example, maybe I'm a software engineer, but I don't want to go into Cambridge. So where is the type of engineering that I want to do, maybe a little bit more close to home, say along 495 instead of 128? Is there a way we can use Google to narrow that sort of stuff down and just to
Absolutely.
find the companies?
Yeah, Google. I wish I owned stock in Google too. I really do. My favorite Google trick is using Google Maps. If you go, I think it's maps.google.com, maybe, and you type in engineering, if that's what you're looking for, and Google will show you the engineering firms or the companies that are doing engineering that are associated with that geography that you've got visible on your Google Map screen. So it will find employers for you you had no idea existed.
And then you go to their website?
Yes, and Google Maps will usually link to their website. So you go to Google Maps, you do the search on the kind of employer you want. It will list them. It will show them in red dots on the map, and it will list them in a bar on the side of the screen. And you can click on the name of the employer, and usually you can see the website. Click on the website, and away you go. You know, or search LinkedIn for that name for somebody who works with that employer. Maybe they're in your network, or maybe they're in the network of someone in your network. There's so many ways to leverage that. Google Maps is wonderful. The other thing I get a big kick out of is Google also does jobs. They're kind of the only serious challenger Indeed and ZipRecruiter have, is Google. And you can just type in jobs near me into Google search, and Google will show you jobs near you. Because of course, Google being Google, it knows where you are. Now, if you don't want where you are, you type in the location you want, and Google will find jobs there. So you can use Google Maps to find employers, and you can use jobs near me to find jobs, and you can be specific. You can say jobs near me accounting, or jobs near me engineering. Or if there's, you know, if you don't want to work for a specific employer, you go jobs near me minus the employer name. It's amazing. It's amazing. Google is so smart. It's so talented.
A long way from what we saw in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very long way. Very long way. But it really helps to have, and this I think is the hardest thing for people to do, it really helps to have a target job title and target employers, you know, and you can use Google Maps to find target employers, but that helps you find the right keywords for your LinkedIn profile and your resume. What are they looking for in the jobs? What job title do they use for the job you want? What skills do they require? What education do they require? It's, you know, there's a whole lot of ways to collect information. And the other thing you can do, if an employer contacts you, Google them, look for reviews, look for a website, a real website for that employer, and, you know, verify that the employer is real. If they don't want to interview you, if they're going to hire you and pay you a lot of money without interviewing you, it's a fake job. Just understand that. But if it's a real job, find out what you can about the employer. You know, Google the employer name and reviews, or go to Glassdoor or Vault and find out what you can about the employer. And of course, use Google to find out what you can about the employer. So you know it's a place you might want to work, or you know somebody who works there, or just learn as much as you can about the employer.
Even before you start the whole job process.
Even before you start that, exactly. So you don't waste your time.
Right. So in the olden days, it was sort of people put the jobs out there in newspapers or just out on the internet and hoped that the potential employee would find them. And so it's now turned all around where actually the person looking for the job is in the driver's seat. Like you said, Susan, you have to think about, well, what kind of work do I want to do? And Richard Bowles' books will help you with that too. So you need to figure out what kind of work you want to do and then find out what those jobs are actually called through all your Google searching. So like using our librarian example, like you did, it would be reference librarian or children's librarian or whatever it is you want to do. And then you pull all those keywords that you get from the internet and incorporate them into your LinkedIn profile and into your resume. And then it all comes together that way.
That's right. And,
so
the other thing that's kind of handy to use is posting a resume on a job board like ZipRecruiter or Indeed. Post your resume there, focus. Now, let me make it clear. If you're employed, if you currently have a job, don't post your resume. And don't make any public announcements anywhere that you're in a job search, because you could lose your job real quickly if you do that. Wow. But if you're unemployed, post your resume on ZipRecruiter or Indeed, and update it every week or so. And the update doesn't need to be significant, add and subtract a space, add and delete a space, and then save the new version of the resume, just to make it look current, because employers are more interested in current resumes than old resumes. So that's another way to find a job, or actually have the job find you. Right, because then people will contact you directly through email, or a recruiter will, and then they'll be helping you look for a job. You can continue to look and the recruiter will look. So, well, I'd be careful about recruiters who want to help you find a job. Recruiters get paid by employers to fill jobs. They don't work for job seekers. Okay. So be a little cautious there. They should be coming to you and asking you if you're interested in the job, not offering to find you a job for a specific fee. That's good advice, right? Because then we start looking at some of the scams that are out there. Exactly. Okay. It's a complicated world, unfortunately. Yes. Go ahead, Katrina. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. So say somebody is looking to move up the ladder and they don't necessarily have experience in the job that they're looking for. How would they add those keywords into their LinkedIn profile or their resume so that they would get considered for a job that they haven't done before?
Well, I would say, get some training in whatever skill is required for that, or do some volunteering for a charity in a role that's associated with that, so you can start building some experience that you can add to your profile. Don't fake it, because that's too easy. That's too easy to dig out these days. Yeah. One of the things people aren't as conscious about as they should be is, back when I worked at Harvard, we would hire firms to do background research on applicants for very senior jobs. Now employers can use Google and LinkedIn to research everybody for every job, and they do it because making what's known as a bad hire is a very expensive mistake. So they do the research. But if you're trying to change fields, if you're an accountant and you want to become a librarian, then demonstrate your interest, take some classes about being a librarian, include those classes on your LinkedIn profile. And that helps add the terms and then give examples of your work. But it's hard to just jump cold from one role to another without having some experience there. I mean, even before Google and LinkedIn.
And that's again where your networking can help too, because the people in your network may say, well, I think, you know, I know this person that might be willing to take a chance.
Exactly. That's right. That's absolutely right. That's the way around it if you don't have the training or the experience and you don't have time for it. Yes. Use your network. Absolutely. Good point. Very good point.
And you know, I'm laughing about it because like Katrina, my second marketing research job that I had, my boss was a former musician. He was in a wedding band for years and years and years. And then he wanted to, you know, get out of that because he needed more steady work. And it was funny because, you know, his boss, which would be my boss's boss, they were good friends. And that's an example of somebody who was willing to give someone a try. And he was a fabulous boss. I loved working with him. You know, he was extremely well organized and could think on his feet because he had spent all these years as a musician, you know, building up his business that way. So it's hard, you know, it's kind of hard to visualize it, but it was great.
The network at work. Networking is the best way. Employers love to fill jobs with someone who has been referred by another employee. Those people are hired like 80% of the time versus, you know, like 5% of the time when you apply. Well, it's not 80%, it's more like 60%, but it's a whole lot. It's a much higher probability that you'll be hired if you're referred by an employee. And that's one of the things you can research when you're you know, researching your employers is, do they have an employee referral program? Do you know anybody that works there? Do they have an employee referral program? Because usually the employee is rewarded with a few $1,000 bonus when you're hired, and especially when you stay and you're successful. And most new employees who have been referred by an existing employee are more successful than somebody who's just hired in from the cold. You know, they've already got a friend inside, so it helps them be more successful. So employee referrals are a fabulous way to get hired, and that's one of the great things that LinkedIn does for you, is it helps you find somebody who can refer you. And they don't have to be a lifelong friend. They can be somebody you exchange email with, you know?
Indeed. So even for us folk who aren't necessarily looking for a job currently, you're saying we should all hop on our LinkedIn and gather as many links as you can. Yep. Just,
Absolutely.
Continually build it up.
And you never know when an employer is going to shut down. I mean, when I worked at DEC, we were in the top, I think we were in the top 50 of the Fortune 500. We were a really big, really powerful, really successful company until we weren't. And then, you know, there were like 140,000 employees. Jobs gone. Jobs gone. So it's like insurance for your career, having a good LinkedIn profile, just in case. And also, I think it helps employers stay on their toes a little bit more. But it's fascinating, the data. It used to be we stayed in our jobs for, you know, 5 years or more. And now the average is coming closer to 3 years. People move on every 3 years. That's becoming much more likely now than it was in the past. It's fascinating how things have changed.
It really is. And in a lot of ways, you know, at first I was thinking, oh, if I had to look for a job today, how difficult it would be. But I think the technology actually, after our conversation, has convinced me it's actually easier to find a job as long as you do your research and your groundwork first. And then it's sort of, sort of does it all on your own. We also have on the Northborough Job Seekers webpage, we also have a link to a database that's the Career Explorer, the Career Accelerator. So some of our listeners who aren't really sure what they want to do, I would suggest starting there, sort of look at your skills a little bit and see where you want to apply them, what type of employer. And then all those things that Susan's been talking about, you could use to start building up like the type of job that you're looking for. You know, finding out what that job title is, what skills are required, what education, because you may be surprised. You may see that you already have a lot of those skills that can transfer into a new career, or as Katrina was saying, to help you move up. You know, like a job will say must have supervisory experience. Well, even if you've supervised a group of volunteers, you have supervisory experience, and a lot of that matters, and you can put that down and it's not a lie. You know, it can be verified. So this is really, really exciting. I hope our listeners are getting some good information about that. Now, I'm sorry for the little stall there, but social media is such a big part of our lives, right? And some of us have good social, and I shouldn't say good, I should say wide reaching or lots of followers on their Facebook page and all that other stuff. I'm wondering, like, what is there such a thing as too much exposure? I mean, if you have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, do you make certain ones that are just targeted towards your job search?
Well, I'm not sure that there's, you know, especially if you're like looking for a job in social media, I don't think you can have too much social media visibility. I think the problem most people have is they're too casual with their social media visibility. You know, there's countless stories of people who, you know, were fired when the company found a picture of them on Facebook where they're smoking pot, where it's not legal to smoke pot, or they're drunk and they're driving. You know, I think we're too trusting of social media in very many ways, and certainly when an employer is doing their research on a job candidate, you know, if they find that kind of information on social media, they're not going to be impressed, and you probably won't get invited to the job interview, and you certainly won't get hired. So being careful on social media is very important. I mean, kind of one of the good things is Facebook, at least the last time I checked, Facebook did not allow Google to sort of absorb everything on Facebook. LinkedIn does allow it. Facebook does not. So you can say bad things on Facebook and maybe not get caught at it. But I have a feeling there are some recruiters with some tricks on how they can dig things out and find you on Facebook. So I would be very careful putting, you know, nasty stuff up in social media, at least associated with the version of your name you use for your resume. And that's an important thing people don't think about very much. I mean, I'm officially Susan P. Joyce because there's a whole bunch of Susan Joyces in the world. There's even another one in my husband's family. So I'm the Susan P. Joyce in Massachusetts with Netability. And that's important. Now, I'm not Sue Joyce, but, you know, maybe if I wanted to write a lot about political issues, I would write as Sue Joyce. Or, you know, if I wanted to take a lot of pictures of people doing disgusting things, I would do it as S Joyce or as SP, whatever, you know. You need to be conscious of the fact that employers definitely Google and recruiters definitely Google job seekers and even employees, and it can end a career or stop an opportunity in its tracks if they find bad stuff.
So that's a great cautionary tale. Good cautionary advice, Susan, because people, you know, sometimes don't think of those things, and yeah,
we're not used to it.
Right. I mean, so I guess we should periodically Google ourselves, especially if we're looking for a job, see what comes up.
Absolutely. There's so many job seekers I've talked to and worked with over the years. And the latest one, a really nice kid I call him a kid because of my age, but he's like in his mid-20s, and he's a techie, and he's a good techie, smart techie, well-educated techie. And whenever he applied for a job, he would hear zip, no reaction at all from the employer when he applied for the job. Well, I Googled his name, and guess what? Somebody with the same name in the same town, because he lived in Boston, was found guilty of abusing children, sexually abusing children.
Horrible.
Now, who wants to hire somebody who sexually abuses children? Nobody. He added his middle initial to his name on his LinkedIn profile and his resumes, and the LinkedIn profile and resume have to match. Don't be Bill on one and William on the other. Be William or Bill on both. Use the same name with the middle initial on the resume and the LinkedIn profile, and guess what? He was hired in 2 months.
Wow.
So you really need to be Googling ourselves.
I call it defensive Googling, and that's really what it is. I mean, I've heard people used to call it ego surfing, and, it was something that only cheesy people did. No, now it's what smart people do. What is out there associated with your name? You don't want to be, aligned with the child sexual abuser. Oh my gosh. Definitely not. And if that person has the same middle name, then, the same middle initial, then you use your middle name, or, you modify your name to the point where you can distinguish yourself from the person that you aren't, who nobody would hire.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling.
We're getting close to our time, and I know Dana's going to beep in and let us know. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, just people need to be visible, but be carefully visible, and do the defensive Googling so you know what's out there about you. And as you were saying, Deborah, even when you're not in a job search, keep that LinkedIn profile up to date. Stay visible and active on LinkedIn. Be there, be visible, be found, or be findable.
Okay.
That's really important now. And just remember, you are public. We've all, and looking back, just think about all the privacy we had for decades, and we didn't value it. We didn't realize how unusual it is, and now we don't have it, and we need to be careful of that.
That's a really good point.
Indeed.
So it's like everything. Is a sort of the downside of this really positive stuff of the internet is that we do have to be careful about how we present ourselves, because potential employers see that as well.
Well, and bad people see that. There was a job seeker I had an argument with a few years ago. He lived in New York City, in Brooklyn or somewhere, and he had a blog, and on his blog he had the pictures of his little kids and the names of his little kids. And it's like, I can understand as a dad, he was proud of that. And maybe I would send that in an email to my family and friends, but I would not post that on a blog.
Right.
Because anybody could see the blog, see the name of the kid, not a good thing. Be careful out there.
Susan, thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed hearing all the positive things that the internet can do, and I hope people that are listening will feel hopeful about their job search, because there's a lot out there, and we can help you here at the library if there's some things that have come up. When you come and listen to this podcast, there'll also be a link to some of the things that Susan was talking about in terms of how to do those Google searches we discussed. So you can find that there. But mostly I wanted to thank my neighbor, Susan Joyce, for being with us today and sharing all your wealth of knowledge. I think it's going to be really, really helpful to a lot of our listeners. So Don't forget to contact us at the Northborough Free Library. Come in and visit. Yes, we are still open. We're at 34 Main Street. Give us a call, 508-393. My mind just blanked.
5025.
Thank you, Katrina. And also find us on the web at Northborough, OUGH
Mm-hmm.
And
Or you can send us an email at podcast@northboroughlibrary.org if you have any questions for Dr. Taco or have any questions for follow-up about this episode or other previous episodes. We'd love to hear from you.
And even if you too may want to be a guest on our podcast, we'd love to hear from you.
For sure. All right.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.